Daniel Sports Central be giving you guys my college game day location predictions for the 2023 college football season. We are just about 2 months away from the kickoff of this upcoming season, and so today I'll be giving you guys my college game day location predictions. This is going to give you a look into some of the biggest games coming up here in the 2023 season. This is a crew that usually goes to the best game of each college football Saturday. And so this is going to be a longer video here today. Let's go ahead and get started with your week one matchups. I've actually got two predicted for week one, this game being on the Thursday night of week one, which last season the crew did go to the opening night Thursday matchup between Pitt and West Virginia last season, and then to a Saturday matchup. So it'd make total sense for them to go to Salt Lake for the Thursday night matchup between Florida and Utah, which, I mean, this is a pretty big matchup here. You got Utah being a team that is kind of in a now or never situation. If they're going to be a big national contender, this is the year for Utah. I mean, this is a team that is a very experienced team right now, looking really good, looking forward to 2023. So a huge season and a huge opening game for them as they take on a Florida team that's kind of in a rebuild phase right now, it seems, but obviously they're in the SEC. They're an outstanding recruiting team, still a very talented team there. So a huge matchup on the Thursday night of week one here, August 31st. It's not confirmed for them to go to a Thursday matchup, but if they did, it would definitely be this game. You also got Nebraska and Minnesota on the Thursday night of week one, but I don't expect them to go to the Twin Cities for that. But for the main week one matchup, I've got Colorado and TCU. And what a matchup this could be here. I mean, Colorado's a team that's had so much hype this offseason, Coach Prime being in there. I think the Buffaloes have got a very bright future, but for 2023, obviously, I mean, they've had a huge mass exodus of players like we've ever seen before. So many players left Colorado. I mean, it's a totally different team here in 2023. So it's obviously going to be interesting to see how they perform in the first week of action, going up against a team that was in the national championship last season in TCU. TCU was an incredible surprise team last year, and it makes you wonder, seeing TCU, a team that many didn't even expect to get 6 or 7 wins last season. I mean, they were a fringe bowl team being predicted heading into the 2022 season, made it all the way to the national championship. It makes you wonder, who could that team be in 2023? Honestly, it could be anyone, which is wild to think about. If TCU could do it in 2022, that means anyone can do it. So it just brings a lot of optimism, I think, to a lot of teams. But I mean, this is a huge matchup, a ton of huge storylines, and for that reason, I think they'll be in Fort Worth, Texas for week one. You also got North Carolina against South Carolina in Charlotte, which is going to be a huge game. Also LSU and Florida State. LSU Florida State is far and away the biggest game of week one. But that game is on Sunday night, so I don't expect them to be at that one. It just wouldn't really make sense because that game is on the Sunday. But Colorado and TCU for week one would make a lot of sense, and that's what I think happens. Moving on to week two, we have got Texas and Alabama in Tuscaloosa. What a huge matchup this could be as well. I mean, this is going to be a future matchup that we see quite a bit. Texas being bound for the SEC pretty soon here. This is the final season in the Big 12 for Texas, and I mean, honestly, for the Longhorns, I wouldn't be surprised one bit if this was their year to finally win the Big 12 once again, and it would be a great storybook ending for their time in the Big 12, that's for sure. I mean, Texas is a solid team, looking forward to 2023, taking on Alabama, and Texas kept it close last season, and Alabama, I don't think they're quite as talented of a team here in 2023, so I mean, for all we know, this could be an incredible matchup here in week two, a huge game with some college football playoff implications. I'd definitely take this one to be the week two matchup. You also got Texas A&M at Miami. That could be a big game, but I mean, I think both Texas A&M and Miami should be good teams in 2023, but I just don't think they have enough hype to in Miami to host game day in week two. I mean, you also got Oregon and Texas Tech. This is a sleeper good matchup here. I mean, you got Oregon, Bo Nix, expect them to be a solid team in the Pac-12. Texas Tech, I could see being a dark horse team in the Big 12 once again. Keep an eye on that one. Same with Utah and Baylor. I could see being in Baylor, but I just think this is far and away the biggest matchup of week two here. You also got Notre Dame and NC State, Nebraska, Colorado also in week two. I guess those are honorable mentions, but there's just no way that game is going to be heading to either of those matchups. But I got Texas and Alabama for week two. What about week three? We've got South Carolina and Georgia for week three. And honestly, this could be a very lopsided matchup here. Georgia is probably the more talented team here for sure, but I do think it makes sense for the crew to go back to Athens after Georgia's second straight national championship early in the season. So I'm going to take South Carolina and Georgia for week 3. I mean, this could be a good matchup as well. South Carolina being a team that's, I mean, they finished out 2022 very strong. So keep an eye on them. But you also got LSU and Mississippi State. That could be a big matchup. Washington and Michigan State could be a big one as well. BYU and Arkansas as well. I mean, you also got Tennessee, Florida, Penn State, Illinois. But in the end, South Carolina and Georgia definitely, I think, is going to be it for week 3. And honestly, for the first 3 weeks, I'm pretty confident in the first 3 picks with Colorado, TCU, Texas, Alabama, and South Carolina, Georgia. But after that, it gets kind of complicated, and this is the first week it gets complicated here. Week 4, I've got Florida State and Clemson in Clemson, South Carolina. I do think the Tigers, they're going to be a national contender once again in 2023, and Florida State, a team that is very much on the rise right now. They are headed right back into national contention here for 2023. I think this is going to be a huge matchup where we learn a lot about both teams here. Clemson is obviously a brutal place to play, so you'll probably be seeing the Tigers as a favorite in this matchup, but Florida State, what an opportunity for them to really make a stand here and have a huge win in week 4. So, and if Florida State can win this matchup, I mean, Florida State very much puts themselves into college football playoff contention. And really, honestly, for both teams here, just a huge game. But you also got Ohio State and Notre Dame. That is also a huge matchup in week 4. It's in Notre Dame, and Ohio State next season, they're always a big contender. Notre Dame, honestly, should be really good as well. Sam Hartman being in there, I expect Notre Dame to be a contender, Ohio State to be a contender. You got multiple huge matchups in week 4. Same with Arkansas and LSU. I expect both of them to be pretty good in 2023. Oklahoma at Cincinnati. I think that's Cincinnati's first game in Big 12 play, hosting the Oklahoma Sooners. You also got Iowa at Penn State. Maybe Colorado at Oregon could be in contention if Colorado has a strong start. UCF at K-State as well. So week 4 is a huge week of action, but I think this ACC matchup does get College GameDay's attention in the end. But looking forward to week 5. We've got Michigan and Nebraska for week 5. Now, week 5 isn't quite as loud of a week as week 4 will be, but honestly, I could see this matchup being between 2 undefeated teams here in week 5. Nebraska's got a pretty simple start to the season as long as they can win their first 2 road matchups against Minnesota and Colorado. If they can do that, they should be 4-0 heading into this matchup, taking on Michigan, who is the Big Ten powerhouse right now. And obviously, Nebraska's got an interesting storyline. Matt Rule, first season for him at Nebraska. And will he be able to lead Nebraska back to success anytime soon? This is obviously a huge test for him. That is for sure. First-year head coach taking on Michigan in week 5. Michigan, the top dog in the Big Ten right now. This could be a fun matchup here in Lincoln. I do want to pick this for the week 5 matchup. You also got multiple big SEC matchups. LSU and Ole Miss is a big one. South Carolina, Tennessee as well. But I would keep an eye on the Georgia-Auburn matchup. Honestly, that's probably the second most likely, I think, for week 5. It just really depends on who has the stronger start between Nebraska and Auburn. I do think the Tigers take a loss against Texas A&M before the Georgia matchup. That's the main reason why I've got it being Michigan and Nebraska. I think Nebraska starts out the season 4-0 as long as they can beat Minnesota on the road there in week 1. But it could be definitely that matchup as well. Multiple big SEC matchups in week 5, but I'm going to take Michigan and Nebraska. Moving on to week 6, we've got Oklahoma and Texas in Dallas, neutral location, the last Red River rivalry matchup of the Big 12. And what a matchup this could be. I think this is between 2 of your bigger favorites in the Big 12, that's for sure. And honestly, yeah, it's going to be a much closer matchup than it was last season. Last season, it was so lopsided. But, I mean, this is also a pretty big week. You got Alabama and Texas A&M there in College Station. I wouldn't be surprised if it was in College Station, considering Texas A&M usually competes up pretty well against Alabama as of late. You also got Maryland and Ohio State. That could be a sneaky good matchup there. Maryland being a team that I could see right around 8 to 9 wins. Ohio State a big contender usually. That could be a big one there. And LSU, Missouri, do not sleep on this matchup either. Missouri could have a really strong start to the season. The schedule sets up pretty favorably for them. So I definitely keep an eye on that one. If Missouri's undefeated, it could definitely be LSU and Missouri. It sounds crazy right now, but the way the schedule sets up, I wouldn't be surprised for that either. So week 6, definitely a stacked week as well. Moving on to week 7, we've got Oregon and Washington in Seattle. This is a huge Pac-12 matchup. Michael Penix against Bo Nix, 2 teams that very much could be a top team in the Pac-12. And honestly, both teams have got potential to be in the college football playoff in 2023. You got 4 teams, especially in the Pac-12, that could be Big time contenders, USC is another one. They're taking on Notre Dame in week 7. That's going to be a huge one. Miami, North Carolina is also a big matchup. Iowa, Wisconsin's a big matchup for the Big Ten West. Honestly, the winner of that Iowa-Wisconsin matchup should be on to Indianapolis and as a division champion. So obviously a lot of big matchups in week 7, but this one really stands out to me. A huge matchup between two rivals here. Definitely going to be a fun one for week 7 in Seattle. Moving on to week 8, we have got Utah and USC, another Pac-12 matchup, which Utah is another team that I could definitely see being a big contender in the conference. And I mean, it's in LA, so it is at USC. And honestly, USC's offense next season is going to be incredible. It's just a matter of whether or not the defense can improve. That was the issue last season. USC would have been in the college football playoff last year, definitely would have had a chance for a national title if their defense was better. Their defense really came back to bite multiple times last season. So if they can get that fixed, keep an eye on the Trojans in 2023. And Utah, it's a tough draw going on the road here, but a huge matchup for week 8. Big time college football playoff implications here as well. I mean, really, this is one of the biggest weeks of the season. You also got TCU, Kansas State in this week, Michigan State's in this week, Wisconsin, Illinois in this week. So week 8 is definitely a stacked one. And by the end of week 8, we should have a pretty good idea as to which teams in the Pac-12 will be your main contenders, as we've got your two big matches between, I'd say, the top 4 teams in the conference between week 7 and week 8. But moving on to week 9, we've got Ohio State and Wisconsin. These two teams usually don't meet in the regular season, but here we are. A pretty big matchup here in Madison. Ohio State being a team that really, Ohio State's got the talent to always be a big national contender. They just haven't won a national title since 2014. Even though they've been so talented over the years. But a huge matchup for them going on the road, a tough place to play in Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin is my Big Ten West preseason favorite, even though the Big Ten West is expected to be once again just a mess in 2023. I think Iowa and Wisconsin are your two top teams in the Big Ten West, and the winner of that week 8 matchup between those two teams, or it's actually week 7 between Iowa and Wisconsin, probably will be the winner of the Big Ten West. But a huge matchup here. You also got Tennessee and Kentucky, Oregon at Utah if you want another big Pac-12 matchup, and then Oklahoma and Kansas. What if Kansas is playing pretty well in late October? It could be that matchup as well, for all we know. And you also got Clemson, NC State. That could be a big one. Georgia, Florida, and even Houston against Kansas State could be a big one as well, as long as Houston isn't a terrible team in 2023. So week 9, a pretty big week, and so is week 10. LSU and Alabama is what I've got for week 10 in Tuscaloosa. This is a huge matchup. Two teams that have grown to be rivals. Just a massive matchup here. Both teams, honestly, whoever wins this matchup, it is in Tuscaloosa, which gives Alabama definitely an advantage, but the winner of this game is in a great position to make it to the college football playoff. You also got Washington and USC. I mean, that's a huge matchup in the Pac-12. Once again, the Pac-12 should be a pretty solid conference once again. It's just a matter of whether or not one of those teams can come out alive after those huge gauntlet matchups, especially in the middle of the season. Kansas State and Texas, you also got in this week a big matchup in the Big 12. You also got Notre Dame and Clemson. Even off this list, I mean, you got Penn State, Maryland, you got Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Oklahoma against Oklahoma State. A huge matchup there, probably the last Bedlam matchup for a while. So, yeah, a lot of big matchups in week 10. I've got LSU against Alabama. Moving on to week 11, we got Michigan and Penn State for this one, a rivalry matchup here in Happy Valley, and this is a huge matchup as well. USC and Oregon, once again, multiple big matchups in the Pac-12 in this middle part of the season. Moving into the later part of the season here. We also got Michigan State, Ohio State, Miami and Florida State, another big matchup in the ACC there. But Michigan and Penn State here, I mean, it's in Penn State. I mean, Penn State's going to be, they're going to be rocking in Happy Valley for this matchup, I can guarantee you. I mean, Penn State should be a team. Drew Aller, I wouldn't be surprised if they were a contender once again here in 2023. It's just a matter of whether or not they can beat Michigan and Ohio State. That was the issue in 2022. They just couldn't get by Michigan and Ohio State. And in the end, both the Wolverines and the Buckeyes were in the college football playoff. But huge matchup here for week 11. This is what I've got for week 11 of the season. But for week 12, it's time for Georgia and Tennessee and Knoxville. Massive matchup. Tennessee, a team that some are kind of confused as to why they still got such high expectations. No more Hendon Hooker. They lost a bunch of key players offensively, even the defense as well. But Tennessee's a team that is reloading, and that's a team that I'm still pretty confident in. Joe Milton has shown his potential already with Tennessee, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was close to the same level that Hendon Hooker was at last season. I see Tennessee being a pretty solid team, a pretty highly ranked team heading into Week 12. Georgia is almost a given. Once again, I wouldn't be surprised one bit. I've said this a few times, but if Georgia won their third straight national championship in 2023, I really wouldn't be surprised. That's a team that is going to be solid once again in 2023. You also got North Carolina, Clemson. That's a big one. Washington and Oregon State, if Oregon State could be a dark horse contender. Michigan at Maryland's also a big one. You also got Kentucky, South Carolina, UCLA, and USC, a matchup between the two future Big Ten teams there, and as well as Oklahoma and BYU. Keep an eye on that one as well. But for this one, it's honestly a no-brainer, Georgia and Tennessee. But for Week 13, rivalry weekend, really this shouldn't come as much of a surprise anymore. We've seen this matchup on College GameDay so many times over the years. It's going to be Ohio State and Michigan. This year it's in Ann Arbor. Michigan has won the past two matchups over Ohio State. Been in the college football playoff and won the Big Ten 2 straight seasons now. They have replaced Ohio State as the top powerhouse in the Big Ten. So for Ohio State, this is a year where they're going to try to take that title back. And this is a huge matchup for Week 13 here, Ohio State and Michigan. We'll see. Can both teams be in the college football playoff once again this upcoming season? It seems unlikely. It's pretty tough to get two teams from the same conference in the college football playoff, and it's the first time that the Big Ten has done it there in 2023. But you also got Texas A&M and LSU in this week. That should be a huge one as long as Texas A&M is playing well. Florida State, Florida, that rivalry matchup should have some life in 2023. Even Alabama and Auburn could be a big one as well. The Iron Bowl, as long as Auburn's playing well. I mean, it's pretty much a given that Florida State's going to be great, Alabama's going to be great, LSU's going to be great. Just a matter of how good the other teams are. And I mean, you also got Penn State, Michigan State, Clemson, South Carolina. You also got North Carolina and NC State. But the main matchup where I think both teams should be great is definitely Ohio State, Michigan. I mean, a lot of these matchups are going to have one big college football playoff contender. This matchup is definitely going to have two big-time contenders with Ohio State and Michigan, and plus it's just an incredible rivalry matchup year after year. So got to go Ohio State, Michigan for Week 13. But a quick recap on the season, I would say Week 4 is the biggest week of the first half of the season. Florida State, Clemson is obviously a huge matchup in the ACC. You could argue it's the biggest conference matchup in the ACC, and it comes in late September. You also got Ohio State and Notre Dame, Arkansas and LSU, Oklahoma, Cincinnati. Cincinnati's first game of Big 12 play there. Iowa, Penn State should be a huge one. Even UCF and Kansas State. So Week 4 is a huge one. I'd say it's the biggest week of the first half of the season. Week 7 is also pretty big. Week 8 is the biggest week of October with Utah, USC, Penn State, Ohio State, Tennessee, Alabama, even TCU, Kansas State rematch of the Big 12 title game last season. Michigan, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Illinois, Clemson, Miami. Week 8, honestly, you could argue to be the biggest week of the season, and it comes in late October. November is always just a huge month. Week after week, so many huge games and big implications. But Week 10 and Week 11 definitely stand out the most in November. Week 13 is obviously just so much fun all around with all the rivalries. Ohio State and Michigan is far and away the biggest matchup of Week 13, though, I would say. But Week 10, Week 11 have such great depth with the matchups. So many big games. And there's 6 weeks in particular that are your biggest weeks of the season. Those are Week 4, 7, 8, 10, 11, and 13. I mean, you could say Week 2, Week 3 also to be big weeks, but those are kind of still in just too early in the season with those non-conference matchups. And the non-conference games can be great, but sometimes they don't have quite as big of implications just because it's so early on, plus not as many conference matchups. Honestly, Week 1 as well, this may be, I'm just going to be honest here, this may be the maybe the quietest Week 1 we've had in a while. LSU and Florida State's definitely the biggest matchup of Week 1, and it comes on Sunday. Otherwise, you got North Carolina, South Carolina, Colorado, TCU, and that's about it. So definitely, I mean, either way, it's going to be an incredible season. So many awesome matchups. The storylines as well. Last season with the 4-team college football playoff before it expands. Obviously, the conference realignment that's ongoing. So a lot of big-time storylines as we look forward to 2023. Let me know your thoughts and comments below on these predictions, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll catch you on the next one.